Hello investigators and welcome to Until the End of Time. My name is Werner. Thank you for joining me. This video will be the final Investigator starter deck leaks roundup. All of the cards were leaked some while ago and due to personal reasons I haven't been able to make a video yet, but here we are and we're going to be talking about every single card that I have not talked about, excluding the reprints. If you want to see those, please check out the Imgur albums in the description where you can see all of the decks, including reprints, including everything I talked about in this video and the previous videos. But today we're talking about 33 new cards, 5 Nathaniel, 10 Harvey, 6 Winifred, 7 Jacqueline and 5 from the Stella deck. Without further ado, let's get going. For Nathaniel Cho, our 5 cards are going to be his random basic weakness, self-destructive, and 4 XP cards, Counterpunch, Boxing Gloves, Taunt, and Physical Training. First up, we have Self-Destructive, a basic weakness that reads Revelation. Put Self-Destructive into play in your threat area. Forced, when you deal 1 or more damage to an enemy, take 1 damage. Action, discard Self-Destructive. As far as basic weaknesses go, this one is on the milder side of things. Not every investigator in the game wants to deal damage. There's plenty of seekers and other clue getters who just want to get clues and don't care about the damage. In addition, even if you are the one to deal the damage, then you won't be dealing a lot of damage all the time. So comparing it to something like Internal Injury from the Dunwich Legacy expansion, which deals 1 direct damage every single turn, this is potentially much milder. Of course, if you are a fighter, and especially if you are a fighter like Nathaniel, who might make multiple attacks, this can be quite devastating. All in all, I think this is pretty mild, however, and the fact that it's a double action means that worst comes to worst, you can always just get rid of it. Next up, we have Counterpunch level 2, which is an upgrade of Counterpunch level 0, which is also from the Nathaniel deck. It reads 0 cost event with 2 XP pips, 2 combat icons and an agility icon. It has the Spirit and Tactic trait. Fast, play when an enemy attacks you before resolving that attack. Fight. This attack targets the attacking enemy. You get +2 combat and deal +1 damage for this attack. Compared to the original, this is significantly better in several different ways. First of all, you are now attacking before the enemy attacks, which means that if your attack kills that enemy, you do not take any damage or horror from that attack. In addition, the +2 combat and +1 damage means that it is very likely to deal, at the very least, some damage. In Nathaniel, this can deal 3 damage. And keep in mind that Nathaniel's ability is once per phase, meaning that most likely this will be your deal 3 damage. All in all, I think this is a very good card. I think it's good in it's great in Nathaniel. I think Nathaniel decks are going to want to include lots of cards that let them deal damage outside of the Investigator phase to take advantage of his ability being only once per phase instead of once per round. Outside of it, I could even see it. This card is good enough. Dealing 2 damage actionlessly is kind of nice, and if there are smaller enemies that nevertheless hit very hard, this could be a very potent include. Keep in mind that it is a tactic card, so it can be included on Stick to the Plan, and keep in mind it is a spirit card for Calvin. Next up, we have the upgraded Boxing Gloves, level 3. Now 2 cost, double combat icons, still on item and weapon. You get +2 combat while fighting. And after you defeat an enemy, you can exhaust the Boxing Glove to search the top 9 cards of your deck for a Spirit event and add it to your hand. Shuffle your deck. So it's better in basically every single way. You now have an additional combat icon, it is cheaper to play, you get more combat and you search deeper. I think that so far the only person running Boxing Gloves a lot is Nathaniel, and Nathaniel will want to upgrade in these straight away because they're just his main weapons and they're just better. For everyone else that has been trying Boxing Gloves, I've seen the Boxing Dog with Ashcan Pete, which is hilarious. I've also heard about people trying the Versatile for Calvin, to put Boxing Gloves in Calvin. So far, none of those have access to this upgraded Boxing Glove, so I don't know. And finally, there have been some people trying to use Bandolier, which gives you additional hand slots for weapons with Boxing Gloves, because the +2 combat applies whenever you are fighting, so that even includes other weapons. I think that's a weird deck. The fact that you need to find your Bandolier before you can actually have all your weapons out is kind of tricky, but it seems kind of fun, and this doesn't seem like the worst. I enjoy it. I think that for Nathaniel players, this is just a pretty straightforward upgrade into it because it's a really powerful upgrade. Speaking of powerful upgrades, let's talk about Taunt level 3. So Taunt has originally from the Dunwich Legacy, has always been a fast way to engage enemies at your location, but it's gotten significantly better. 1 cost event, 3 XP, 2 willpower icons, a combat icon and an agility icon. It is still a tactic and it reads fast, play during any free triggered window, engage any number of enemies at your location. For each enemy engaged this way, deal it 1 damage and draw 1 card. So compared to the level 2, this also draws you the cards, but it also deals 1 damage to each of these enemies, and it's during any player window. This is really strong. Specifically, this allows you to pull enemies off of your fellow investigators outside of your turn, which can be very important if they want to go first. Likewise, if you are playing Nathaniel, this can be used even before the investigation phase begins if enemies were drawn during the Mythos phase, because there is an action window before the Mythos phase ends and the investigator phase begins, which gives you another chance to deal an additional +1 damage with this ability. The fact that it still draws cards and deals damage is great. I can only imagine that when going up against the swarms in the Dream Eaters campaign, you would want to run this card because it potentially kills an entire swarm in one go and draws you as many cards as enemies you just killed. It still seems great in Zoe. I really like this. I think the fact that it's no longer during your turn is incredibly good. Don't underestimate that. Like the ability to control enemies even during, say, the enemy phase, right? An enemy hunts to your location, but it has a prey to another investigator. Before the enemy attacks, you taunt them and pull them over to you, drawing a card, dealing a damage. There's a lot of flexibility in that ability, and I really like it. And then finally, we have Physical Training level 4, a 2 cost asset, 2 willpower and 2 combat icons. It is a talent. It uses 2 resources, but replenishes these resources at the start of each round. And then it has a fast ability to spend a resource either from your resource pool or from physical training to give yourself +1 willpower or +1 combat. So we've seen a similar card to this in Mystic with Arcane Studies level 4. And it's got kind of the same problem that that card has, which is that spending 4 XP on a stat booster is not something a lot of people are inclined to do. Once you get to the 4 XP cards, you really want to get these big upgrades, these exciting upgrades. That being said, this card is fairly powerful. I think the ability to have willpower boosts at the Mythos phase, and if you don't need them then, you can spend the resources during your investigator phase to deal combat. It's pretty good. I just don't see it happening that much. Most Guardians have plenty of ways to get their combat value up, and the only investigator I could see who would really like to have repeatable willpower boosting, which is Carolyn, can't take this, because Carolyn Fern, the psychologist or psychiatrist, I don't know what her subtitle is, she casts spells, so she might be able to use the willpower, but she can only take Guardian level 0 to 3, so she can't take this. So yeah, I think I don't want to be too down on this card. I definitely think there might be somebody who totally makes it work, and I mean, +2 combat every round, what's the worst that could happen? But I think that it struggles from just not being exciting enough for a 4 XP card. We'll have to see. I'm intrigued to see if people will break it, because I think it's a really cool card. Harvey Walters has a whole list of new cards, 5 new 0 XP cards and 5 new XP cards. I'm not going to list them all off, we're just going to run through them real quick. First up, we have the new disc of ITZAMNA, which was already partially visible in one of the announcement articles. It is a 0 cost asset with 0 XP asset, 3 cost. 1 willpower icon. It is an item and a relic, and it has the text reaction: when a non-elite enemy spawns at your location, discard the disc, automatically evade that enemy or deal it 2 damage, and it takes up the accessory slot. I think this card is actually really good, or specifically very important, because it helps solo seekers deal with enemies. If you can kill an enemy just by dealing it 2 damage, you obviously probably are going to. Otherwise, you can automatically evade the enemy and give yourself a chance to run away. The accessory slot is not the most hotly contested thing in Seeker, but there are some other cards that want to go in there. Pendant of the Queen and the Grisly Totem are pretty good cards that do both take up the accessory slot. But I think for solo, especially, having more level 0 options to deal with enemies is very important for Seekers, so I like this card for that reason. Otherwise, 3 cost to deal 2 damage is a lot, and automatic evasion isn't that useful unless you need to get away from something. So I would probably skip over it unless that's something you're doing. Next up, we have the level 0 Encyclopedia, which is 2 cost, asset, walled icon, item, and tome. It uses 5 secrets and has an action to exhaust the encyclopedia and spend the secrets. Choose an investigator at your location. That investigator gets +2 to a skill of your choice until the end of the phase, and it takes up a hand slot. The level 2 encyclopedia is a classic from the core set that had the same ability but didn't use any secrets. I think this card is pretty good. Basically, Encyclopedia was a Daisy Walker card most of the time. Not a lot of other investigators ran it, and this is still really good, even though it is now limited uses, because 5 is a lot. You'll be able to get, a good chunk of value out of that. Keep in mind that it is an entire phase worth of value, so you can investigate 3 times or fight 3 times with that bonus. And the ability to just include this into your level 0 decks is very important if you're doing something like the scroll of, not the scroll of secrets, the scroll of... What's the Scroll of Knowledge? No, the Mystic one. Basically, there are other limited uses tomes that Daisy has taken, and they've all been fairly good. So I think this card will be playable. I think this card will be played, and it's actually probably quite a big deal for Daisy. Just boosting stats for a phase long is really good, and doing so at 0 XP is quite powerful. Next up, we have the new Feed the Mind, level 0, another downgrade. 1 agility icon, 3 cost. It uses 3 secrets. It's a spell. Takes up the arcane slot, and it reads action, exhaust Feed the Mind, and spend 1 secret to test intellect 1. For each point you succeed by, to a maximum of 3, draw 1 card. Now, Feed the Mind level 3 is a curious card that I haven't seen a lot of people use yet. Probably because it's the nature of taking skill tests to get something. And this card suffers from all those problems and more. However, it is also 0 XP, which means that potentially anyone could take this. Because if you can reliably pass this test by 3 points, so you get an intellect of 4 result basically, you are drawing a lot of cards, right? This is 9 cards for 3 cost and 3 actions, or 4 actions I guess. The problem is going to be reliably passing those tests, especially given that most main class seekers can already draw cards better. They have more reliable ways, and off-class seekers are probably not going to get the intellect boost reliably enough. I'm curious to see where this goes. I think there are going to be people who are gonna try to make this work. I think that it is a big upfront cost to draw a whole bunch of cards, and my question is mostly going to be, what do you do once you have all those cards? Because there's already plenty of card draw in the game, and this is just a very bulky way of doing it. But I do think it has, I don't know, it's a lot of cards. That's basically it, right? It's a lot of cards for 0 XP, which maybe people will make it work. We have Higher Education, level 0. Has a willpower icon and an intellect icon. It is a talent, and it reads, while you have 5 or more cards in hand, you can spend 1 resource to gain +1 willpower for a skill test, or spend a resource to get +1 intellect for a skill test. And this is a 0 cost asset. This is obviously compared to Higher Education level 3, which is one of the more overpowered cards in the entire game. So much so that it has a massive XP penalty or XP surcharge if you're going with the taboo rules. This card, however, is significantly worse because not only do you not always have it in play, because it does not have the permanent keyword, it also only gives you a single pip worth of advantage for 1 resource. I think that's actually probably the bigger deal here. Maybe not. I guess permanent would still be really strong. Never mind. It would still be way too strong with permanent. But something to remember here is that willpower boosting and intellect boosting for 1 is a very different thing than 1 for 2. So I think this card is fine. I don't think it's actually that exciting. I think most people have better ways of passing their test these days. But I do think, if you're a newer player who maybe doesn't have a full collection or it's just, needs to get some intellect boost, this is a perfectly fine card. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. It is perfectly fine. Next up, we have actually kind of an important card. We have Burning the Midnight Oil. a 0 cost event with an intellect and a agility icon, a 0 XP. It is insight traded and it reads Investigate. When this action begins, gain 2 resources. Now we've seen Clean Them Out, which is a fight action with that same text. You get 2 resources when it starts. And we will also discuss Sneak By, which is the rogue version, which have Evade. And this is significantly better than both of those. Which is bothering me because Seekers already had great economy, but whatever, I'll worry about that in a different video. But basically, the reason why this card is so good is because you can always investigate. Whereas you'll need an enemy to fight or evade, which is the other two. This can basically be done turn 1 in most scenarios. And at that point, this card bears a lot of resemblance to a different card, Emergency Cash, which reads gain 3 resources. But if you wanted to, you could basically say this is resource. When this action begins, gain 2 resources. Because that's essentially the same card. Now what you're doing is you're replacing the resource action with an investigate action, or a fight action, or an evade action. And that is quite good. The other reason why these cards are better than Emergency Cash is because they have intellect and agility, or just icons in general. Emergency Cash has no icons and is kind of a bad include for that reason. So yeah, I think in general these cards are good. They're better econ, and if you're a new player, that's something you definitely need. You just need ways to make resources that are better than just grab a resource or play Emergency Cash. But Burning the Midnight Oil is very efficient. I think it will see a lot of play in Secret decks because, I mean, you're always going to be investigating. Even off-class Seekers often will still just investigate occasionally. And just turning a card into 2 resources is a good deal at that point. So yeah. Exciting, or maybe not the most exciting card, but definitely a good card. Next up, we have a very curious card, which is Glimpse the Unthinkable level 1. I don't even know where to start with this. So 0 cost event, 2 intellect icons, 1 XP, insight traded, draw 1 card. Shuffle any number of non-weakness cards from your hand into your deck, then draw that many cards. So we have seen Glimpse the Unthinkable level 5, which is a 1 cost event from the Circle Undone, which lets you draw cards until you hit your maximum hand size, which is exciting. I think actually a card that probably will go into Harvey decks if you're doing the big hand Harvey thing. This does something very different, but sort of gives you a pseudo mulligan in the middle of your game, right? You draw a card to replace Glimpse the Unthinkable, then you take any number of cards you don't want, you shuffle them into your deck, and you draw that many cards. You do not ignore weaknesses this time, so, you know, actual mulligans are way better, but I think that this could potentially be quite a lot of card draw for a 0 XP, or sorry, for a 1 XP 0 cost event. And that's something that's, you know, worth considering. This card is a lot of card draw. If you have multiple cards in hand that aren't doing anything, just get rid of them and get something new. Can't guarantee the new cards will be better, but hey, it's worth a shot. So yeah, I think this is a card that will see play. Next up, we have the Esoteric Atlas level 2. Now, this is an important card, I think. So, a 3-cost asset, 2 XP, willpower and agility icon. It is an item and tome, and it uses 4 secrets. And as an action, you can spend 1 secret to choose a revealed location up to 3 locations away from your location to move to that location. It takes up a hand slot. Now, the Esoteric Atlas level 1 was in the Circle Undone, and it was widely considered to be a fairly mediocre card. It is often compared to Pathfinder, which has similar cost and XP cost, but is far less restricted in its use. And when Esoteric Atlas level 2 was first shown, a lot of people were immediately like, I don't know if this is good or not. But upon, you know, discussing the card some more, it actually turns out this card is probably quite good. The first thing to keep in mind is that this card does not exhaust. If you just need to cross the entire map, you can do so in 2 actions, right? Most games do not feature locations more than 6 connections away, so you should be good on that front. Secondly, the ability to move up to 3 connections in 1 single action is really powerful. There are some scenarios, and I'm thinking, which is the name? It's the Wages of, is it the Wages of Sin or Secret Name? It's the Wages of Sin in Circle Undone, which has all the heretics. You have to move the heretics to the right locations in order to banish them. This is a very powerful effect to do something like that. Now, it is still fighting against Pathfinder for this like free movement, but I think where this card comes in is not so much in the ability to move every single turn, or to augment your movement. It's just to go really, really far. That does mean it maybe goes into somewhat more of a only include this if you know what the campaign is going to ask of you. So if you know that maybe the last scenario you're going to have to run around a bunch, you might upgrade into this. But I think this card definitely has merit. Even if you don't move exactly 3 locations, you maybe move a few less, but it allows you so much mobility. It's kind of crazy, actually. Of course, also those users, you can recharge those and resupply those. And it is worth pointing out, of course, Pathfinder isn't a core set card. It's a Dunwich Legacy card, so maybe not everybody has it. And if you are playing maybe Ursula Downs or another Seeker that really wants some mobility, I think Esoteric Atlas is really good. I think its comparison to Pathfinder is somewhat unfair because Pathfinder is a really strong card, maybe a bit too strong. And I think Esoteric Atlas definitely, level 2 is definitely a good card that is worth consideration. Next up, we have Wit and Green, level 2. Hunter of Rare Books, a 4-cost asset, 2 XP, a Willpower and a Intellect icon, ally and Miskatonic traded. While you control a Tome or Relic asset, you get +1 Willpower and +1 Intellect. Reaction, after you reveal a location or put a new location into play, exhaust her, search the top 9 cards of your deck for a Tome or Relic asset and draw it. Shuffle your deck. Takes up the ally slot and she has 2 health and 3 sanity. She's very comparable to the level 0 with an green. She gets +1 willpower and +1 intellect. And she searches a little deeper and she has 1 more sanity. And that's about it. I think if you were playing Wit and Green level 0, you're going to include the level 2 version because it's just better. But I also think both of these kind of struggle from the fact that Seekers have very good allies right now. And I don't know if she necessarily makes the cut. I think there are some cool things you can do with her though. And the fact that she does search again, like there are research cards that trigger when you search your deck and find them. So I like her, and I like her as a not necessarily overpowered card, which is something that Seekers maybe need a little bit of right now. Okay, next up we have a very confusing card, Seeking Answers level 2. And I'm going to explain the card first and then I'm going to talk about why all these other cards are on screen because it's going to get a little complicated. A 1-cost event, 2 XP, a single intellect and 2 agility icons, insight traded, investigate. If you succeed, discover 2 total clues from among your location and connecting locations. Now, this is an upgrade on the Dunwich Legacy Seeking Answers, which let you investigate, and then if you succeeded, instead of discovering a clue at your location, you could get a clue at a different location, or connecting one. However, this card has a quirk in its wording which makes it much more powerful than it might seem. Because this card does not discover 2 clues, this card discovers 3 clues. Because notice the lack of the word instead. This means that as a normal investigate action, you will first investigate, you will get a clue because you just investigated, and then you will finish the rest of the text on the Seeking Answers, which gets you 2 clues from your location or connecting locations. But then suddenly this is a 1-cost event, 2 XP, that just gets you 3 clues. And that's really strong. Now Seekers have deduction level 2, which is a powerful effect as well, which gets you 3 clues if you succeed by 2. But comparing deduction without something like Practice Make Perfect, which lets you recur it and use it multiple times, Seeking Answer seems like a very, very powerful card, perhaps a little too powerful. And so this starts getting into the question of, is this a mistake, right? As written, this card gets you 3 clues. There's not a lot of discussion possible there because there's no using instead. So it is just in addition to the normal clue. But this is potentially a mistake. I don't know. As it is written, it is incredibly powerful because not only does it let you get 3 clues for a single action, it also lets you take a low shroud location where you have 1 clue, Seeking Answers there, get the 1 clue from that location, and then have a connecting location with a very high shroud where you get the other 2 clues and you don't have to investigate there at all. And that's kind of messed up. So I wouldn't hold your breath. I wouldn't hold my breath on an FAQ or maybe an errata here, but I wouldn't be surprised if they errated it. It is definitely a question of was this intentional? Because if it was intentional, then awesome, we just got a really, really powerful new clue getting card. If it wasn't intentional, then they might just errata it and change it to be if you succeed, instead of discovering clues normally, you get 2 clues from your location and connecting locations, which is not a very convoluted fix. If that happens, I guess I should also talk about what the power level of this card is if that happens. I think it will still be good, but it depends a little bit more on your group size and other stuff. For example, if you're playing solo, the stock in this card goes up way higher because it allows you to get clues from different locations without having to run back. And in solo, there will often only be a single clue on a lot of locations. So yeah, I think this is definitely one of those like, oh, is this supposed to be a Ratat, or is this just what it's supposed to be? And I think, well, it's a powerful effect. We'll see. Next up, we have Perception level 2. I think after we saw Manual Dexterity and Overpower level 2, we're kind of expecting this one. It is bonkers. It is really good. 2 XP skill card, 3 intellect icons, practiced and expert traded, max 1 committed per skill test. And if this test is successful, you draw 1 card, 2 cards instead if it succeeds by 2 or more. And the main reasons why this card is busted is because of Practice Makes Perfect, which I already mentioned just a minute ago, which lets you search your deck for a practice skill card and then commit it. And if you succeed, you get to pull it back to hand and then commit it again to a different test. So this lets you draw 4 cards, which is a bit messed up. Alternatively, the upcoming Seeker from the Intimate Conspiracy is Amanda Sharp, who puts cards underneath her and then commits those cards to every single skill test she can take. It's messed up. I've played with somebody in a campaign right now, even though we don't know her signatures yet, so hopefully her signatures kind of balance it out, but this card is... drawing 6 cards while just investigating normally it's kind of bonkers. So yeah, I think this one is the best out of the set, and I'll talk about the other ones a bit more when we get to Guts level 2, which, spoiler alert, is also a card. Okay, first up though, we have Winifred. Winifred has a single level 0 card, Sneak By. I already mentioned that one, and we have some upgrades as well. So Sneak By, pretty simple card. It's a trick, which is very important because a certain athlete might be interested in it. But it is a 0 cost or 0 XP event, 0 cost, double agility icons, evade. When this action begins, gain 2 resources. I think this card is great. I think a lot of rogues will want to play this because rogues care about money. And rogues like to evade, at least some of them do. And the thing to remember here is that it's not a economy card for the start of the game. It's not a setup economy card, but it is one to keep going later and later into the scenario. So if you have things like Lola Santiago or Delilah, which are money sinks, right, where you put lots of money in and get a powerful effect, this can help you fueling that ability, keep you going. If you are Finn Edwards, this is, by the way, your bonus action. You can use your bonus action for this. It's really good. But yeah, the fact that you do need an enemy here to actually be able to evade something, that does kind of hurt this thing's chances a bit. But it does also have double agility icons, which I really like. I really like the fact that this has double icons, which I don't think either of the other ones have. Moving on, we have Liquid Courage level 1, which is, I think, the upgrade nobody was really asking for, but here it is. Double will icons, 1 cost asset, 1 XP. It is an item and illicit. It uses 4 supplies still. And it has a pretty convoluted ability. Action, spend a supply. Choose an investigator at your location to heal 1 horror. Then that investigator tests willpower 2. If the test succeeds, they draw a card. If the test fails, they heal an additional horror and discard a card at random from their hands. Now, level 0 Liquid Courage was fairly similar, but it had the additional horror heal on the success and a discard card on the fail. Now, both of those happen on the fail, and if you succeed, you actually draw a card. This is strange, but I don't dislike it. So it heals horror, which is always good. It tests willpower, which is kind of bad in rogues, but then if you are bad at willpower tests, odds are the additional horror heal definitely helps, even though it costs you cards in hand. There's also Dexter Drake, which is the mystic from the book and also now the Intimate Conspiracy. He's probably going to succeed at that willpower test, and then he can use this to draw cards and then throw this away for his ability. So I think there's some potential here. It's somewhat of a curious card which both rewards for success and failure in Rogue, which is normally a survivor thing. But I'm curious to see people play with this. I think this card is decent enough. I mean, it's 1 cost and it heals you a bunch of horror. How bad could it really be? Next up, we have the Mauser level 2. 3 cost So it's gone down 1 resource, 2 XP, combat icon, agility icon, item, weapon, firearm, and illicit. Still uses 5 ammo, still takes up a hand slot, and it has an action to exhaust it, spend an ammo, fight. You get +2 combat, +1 damage with its attack, so you get an additional +1 combat. If you succeed by 2 or more, ready the gun or gain a resource, or if you succeed by 4 or more, do both. Card's great. It's just everything that the original Mauser did, but just a little bit better. Gives you more combat and a benefit if you succeed by 4, which might happen, right? We have characters like Tony, who has very high base combat, so if you maybe draw an Elder Sign, you just get both a resource and ready the gun. In general, this gun has the same issues as the original Mauser, which is that if you fail your test, you now don't have, you haven't killed the enemy and your gun is exhausted, so that's a problem. But that's just something, otherwise the gun is very powerful, so kind of, yeah, I'm expected to see this one played. It's comparable to, I think, the 41 Derringer, level 2, which has less ammo, way less ammo, and potentially give you extra actions. So this has a similar kind of feel where if you succeed by a lot, you get rewarded, but even if you succeed by a little, it's still decent. Next up, we have Daring Maneuver level 2, a 0-cost event with a single wild icon, Gambit traded, fast, play when you would succeed at a skill test, you get +2 or +3 skill value for this test, draw 1 card. It's okay. So the good news is that it draws you a card, but I don't know, even at 0-cost fast draw card, I'm not that excited for this card. The +3 skill value is kind of nice, but I've never really used the Daring Maneuver level 0 that much. I think if you're going to play it, you should probably have multiple succeed by 2, succeed by 3 effects, which there are a couple more coming up in this pack, so at least there's that. But yeah, you definitely want to have the succeed by X effects first, and like ones that actually pay you off. Like the Mauser's not a bad one, right? Being able to ready the gun and get money, that's something already. You have watch this and stuff like that, because optimally, you play this when you succeed by 0, and then you +3 gets you succeeding by 3, or at least by a bunch. But there are several more succeed by X effects in Rogue now, thanks to Winifred's pack, so I definitely think there are targets for this. But the question is going to be, do you have space and 2 XP left over somewhere? Next up, Cheap Shot level 2, a trick, 2-cost event, combat and agility icons, fight. Add your agility value to your skill value for this attack. If you succeed by 1 or more, automatically evade the attacked enemy. If you succeed by 3 or more, return Cheap Shot to your hand at the end of your turn. This is pretty decent. It's kind of an oddball card, which I like. So the original Cheap Shot was similarly where you could fight, and if you succeeded by enough, you could evade the enemy as well, which is pretty nice. This is the same, but easier to succeed by X because you only need to succeed by 1, and you can do it repeatedly. Now, if you are playing as a rogue, you can use this with Chuck, who we've talked about, I think, in the last video, who has a whole bunch of effects that trigger on tactic or trick events. But this card is also a trick which Rita can take. And Rita has, I think, an 8 if you just don't even have anything else boosting, because she has a agility of 5 and a fight of or combat of 3. So succeeding by 3 repeatedly doesn't seem that unusual or unlikely. And then this becomes a repeatable 2 damage plus evade event, because let's not forget, Rita, whenever she evades an enemy, she can deal 1 damage or move for free. If you are using this with Chuck, you can use this fast, because Chuck gives a discount, a stat boost, or makes the event fast. So there's a lot to like in this card, and I really think this is one of the cards that was like, okay, now I understand how you're going to build a Chuck deck, because there were just a couple missing pieces. There was just not enough like powerful effect. This is a really powerful effect if done over and over and over again, because you can just lock enemies down, right? You just grind them into dust. You don't kill them very fast, but you don't have to, because they're never going to attack you, because you just always keep evading them. Speaking of always evading them, let's talk about Slip Away level 2. 2-cost event, agility and intellect icons. It's a trick, starting to feel a little familiar. Evade. Add your intellect to your skill value for the evasion attempt. If you succeed by 1 or more, the evaded enemy is non-elite, it does not ready. If you succeed by 3 or more, return Slip Away to your hand at the end of your turn. Okay, so we get to evade stuff forever, right? The original Slip Away is fun, but I think it's had some issues, mostly being to spending 2 costs and just, keeping an enemy evaded for another turn only really helps if it's a hunter enemy, or otherwise, you benefited from not readying. However, with the upgraded Slip Away, it is very possible that you just keep one enemy frozen, essentially, for as long as you need to, really. Again, combos with Chuck, combos with Rita, who can do this, evade for 2 turns and then move away with her ability, which means you can put so much distance between you and the enemy. And I think one to keep in mind is that the next rogue in the Instrument Conspiracy is going to be Trish. And Trish is probably going to combo with keeping enemies on the board. The designers have said as much. And then this might be a good effect to do repeatedly, where you can keep one hunter enemy locked down and it stays on the board and you use your ability, whatever that's going to be, thanks to this card. So yeah, that's Rogue. Let's talk about Mystics. Jacqueline Fine, who has a whole slew of extra XP cards to talk about. Eldritch Inspiration level 1 is a 0-cost event, 1 willpower icon and 2 intellect icons. It is a spell and spirit. Fast, play when you would resolve an effect on a Mystic card that triggers when, if, or after a Chaos token is revealed. Either cancel that effect or resolve it an additional time. Just like the original Eldritch Inspiration, which is from the Circle Undone, this card is somewhat weird because it doesn't immediately become obvious what these effects are. The most notable, or the most obvious examples right away are any effect that triggers off the new spells, which all have effects when you draw +1, a 0, or the Elder Sign. Original Eldritch Inspiration cannot cancel those because it only cancels the special, like the bad stuff tokens. This works on any token. I think there's also something to be with the recharge card, stuff like that. I still think that the ability itself is somewhat niche and maybe needs a little bit of work. I would have liked this a lot more if it was maybe 2 XP, but also drew you a card when you fired it off. But yeah, I don't know. I have to see what you're going to use this on before I'm really excited to run it. But I do think, the more Mystic cards we get, the better this gets, obviously. So yeah, weird card. And now we get to a really exciting card. It's Grotesque Statue, level 2. 3 cost, 2 XP, willpower and agility icon. It is an item and relic. Takes up the hand slot. Uses 3 charges. If it has no charges, discard it. Reaction. When you would reveal a Chaos token, spend a charge, reveal 2 Chaos tokens instead of 1. Choose one of those tokens to resolve and ignore the other. The reason this card is exciting to me is because I think Grotesque Statue level 4 is really strong, and it hasn't been played a lot because the 4 XP cost is quite difficult, and also just using 4 charges just always felt like it was a little too... It wasn't enough, basically. Now, I know that Akachi can run the level 4 Grotesque Statue and then uses her signature card, Spirit Speaker, to return it to her hand and play it over and over again. She can also do that with this card. It's a little bit more expensive and you get fewer uses out of it, but that's still really good. But also just for every other Mystic who don't want to spend, or maybe doesn't want to spend 4 XP to buy the 4 charges, they might still spend 2 XP to get the 3 charges. If their money can afford the 3 cost asset, the ability is really strong, right? It makes it so you do never fail against the autofill, because as long as you can beat every other token in the bag, you reveal 2 tokens, one of them is the autofill, the other is any other token, you beat that token. Also, of course, for any kind of multiple token reveal strategy, this is a very powerful effect that has been very expensive in the past and now is a little bit more accessible. Also, just this being 2 XP means it's no longer gated to pure Mystics only. It can also be taken by off-class Mystics, and I'm personally really excited for the first person to try it in Patrice with Scavenging, which is a survivor card that lets you bring items back from the discard pile and just have this effect on all the time, because that seems awesome. Hypnotic Gaze level 2, it is a upgrade on the Corset, or Dunwich actually, that was a Corset card for some reason. 2 cost event, 2 XP, combat and 2 agility icons. It is a spell, fast, play when an enemy attacks an investigator at your location, cancel that attack, reveal a random token from the Chaos bag. If it has a special token symbol, deal damage to the attacking enemy equal to its damage or horror. So it's okay. 2 XP makes this card reasonably better. It's cheaper, which is nice because the original card was way too expensive. And it also has now the option that if an enemy happens to have a lot of horror but not a lot of damage, then you can do that. But ultimately, it's still very niche. Like, compare this to Dodge, which is a card that just cancels an attack for 1 cost fast in Guardian. That card barely gets played because canceling attacks just isn't that necessary. Most of the times, skilled players are able to avoid getting attacked in the first place, or they can soak it up or whatever. Hypnotic Gaze basically is the same as Dodge unless you draw a special token, which means that now the pressure on revealing that special token becomes way higher, because if you don't, then this is just a really bad dodge. And that's kind of where I'm at with this card. It's like, okay, yes, you can use effects that give you more token reveals, obviously. You know, Jacqueline has an ability, we just saw Grotesque Statue, but those aren't free either. And it's just like, is it worth the effort, right? Unless you're fighting something that has like, deals like 5 or 6 horror in 1 attack, I don't know if it's worth the effort. I don't think it is. But maybe I'm downplaying this card. I don't know. I think it needs a little more. Or maybe just not that good effect in the first place. Next up, we have Guts level 2, which is kind of following the expectation. 3 willpower icons, innate and developed, 2 XP, max 1 combat per skill test. If the test is successful, draw 1 card, 2 cards instead if it succeeds by 2 or more. I think that out of the 4 that are templated like this, so excluding Unexpected Courage, this one's the worst. And the reason for that is pretty straightforward. I think that as a card draw effect, this card isn't very good, because it's only 2 cards for 2 XP, and only if you succeed by 2 or more. Now, if you succeed by 2 or more, that essentially means that the skill icons in this card were mostly wasted. You got maybe 1 willpower icon out of it. Sure. The problem is that Mystics never take advantage of succeeding by 2 and have no ways, as far as I can think of, to replay this card over and over and over again. The other 2 that are really good are Manual Dexterity and Perception. Manual Dexterity because rogues really like to succeed by a lot, so the ability to succeed by 2 isn't wasted, right? If you throw Manual Dexterity and watch this and Quick Thinking into a test, then all of those icons are all contributing to this succeed by 2 effect, and that's really good, and you get a lot of value, even if it's a difficult test. And Perception is good because, as we already mentioned, with Practice Makes Perfect, you can do it multiple times. I think this card, I know some people were really excited for this card because they were like, ooh, it's card draw, Mystic, we don't have a lot of that. But I'm afraid that this doesn't replace Arcane Initiate. This is still just going to be, I don't know, I don't think it's I don't want to downplay, or I don't want to just like no-sell this card, but for 2 XP, I think you can do better. Overpower, by the way, which is the last one I didn't mention, the Guardian 1 combat, I think it's reasonable. Again, Guardians don't really want to have a lot of combat icons and then draw 2 cards or succeed by 2 that often, but they do have sometimes situations where they have to go really high. With Mystics, they usually can already get their willpower up high enough. I don't know. I don't want to dislike this card, but I think it's just at 2 XP not that amazing. Then we have the spell suite. Azure Flame level 5 is a 3-cost asset, willpower and double combat icons. A spell, uses 4 charges, takes up the arcane slot, and you spend a charge to fight. The attack uses willpower. Instead of combat, you get +3 willpower and deal +2 damage for the attack. If you reveal a Elder Sign, +1 or 0 token, you take 2 damage. This is pretty comparable to Shriveling level 5, which is to be expected. I think they're intentionally making the spell suite the same as that one. This is powerful if you want to get that kind of spell, right? If you're looking for a spellcaster to have powerful endgame spells, these are reasonable. You know, upgrade into them, run Arcane Research so you can upgrade into it for free. Keep in mind that taking 2 damage is no joke. And this is where maybe that Eldritch Inspiration we talked about a couple of cards ago comes into play. You can cancel taking 2 damage, which is no small thing. Next up, it's time for Werner to get really upset. It's Clairvoyance level 5. So I'm going to talk about this card first, and then I'm going to talk about a bunch of other stuff. So 4-cost asset, 5 XP. willpower, 2 intellect icons. It is a spell. It uses 3 charges. Action to spend a charge, investigate. You use willpower instead of intellect. You get +3 willpower for this investigation. If you succeed, discover 2 additional clues. If a elder sign +1 or 0 token is revealed, take 2 horror. Takes up the arcane slot. Now, comparing this to Writer Seeking level 4 for a minute, the only differences are that it is 1 less XP or 1 more XP, and it is 1 cheaper, and you get +3 willpower instead of +2 willpower. And that's the changes between the 2 cards. Now, let's talk about why I'm upset by this, or upset is a big word. I think this card is fine. I think the design is fine. I think it's okay. I'm just disappointed. Because I was hoping that for this powerful end of the cycle, or end of the chain clairvoyance upgrades, they wouldn't go with 2 additional clues. And the reason for that is because it is completely... It completely ruins not only this card, but also the level 3 version for 2-player games, which I've played a lot of. The problem is that in 2-player games, any campaign other than the core set or Dunwich feature very few locations that have more than 2 clues in a 2-player game, because it's just all 1 clue per investigator locations, basically. Now, there's going to be 1 or so per scenario that have more than that, but that doesn't justify this spell that has 3 charges, only 1 of which I potentially used to get 3 clues. All the other ones are 2. Now, this makes this upgrade very poor, because I'm just going to be spending 2 XP to get, once per scenario, you get an extra clue. Otherwise, not that good. And in fact, it actually makes it worse because I now also take 2 horror instead of the 1 horror before. So, like, almost a worse card, to be honest. And it makes the level 3 version worse, because upgrading into the level 3 version is good if you're using it as a stepping stone to the upgraded level 5 version. But if you never want to go to the level 5 version, is the level 3 version even that useful? It gives you +2 willpower, but you don't really need that as a mystic, right? There are other ways to spend your XP and get better willpower. So that means that I'm just going to end up, just like with Writer Seeking, to have the level 0 version still in my deck and have these 2 upgraded, which don't do anything for me because I play 2-player. Now, that's a lot of rant, and I'm sorry if that's kind of overtly negative. It's an annoyance with design because it feels like it's such a... It's like doing the damage thing, where it's like, oh, well, if +1 damage is good, +2 damage must be better. And it's like, well, but that doesn't work the same way with clues. But I do like this card, and if you're playing 3 or 4 player, you should absolutely play this card, right? Even if you're playing 2-player, maybe you still try this. I don't know. I personally, I've had bad experiences with it because, you know, you just don't get that 3rd clue, like, barely ever. But it's a reasonable upgrade. And the +3 willpower is actually kind of nice in that context, and also, especially the -1 cost is very good. Okay, moving on, we have Ineffable Truth. Let's finish up this cycle so we can get on to the best cards, which are the Survivor cards. 3 cost, 5 XP, asset, spell, willpower, and 2 agility icons. Uses 3 charges. You spend a charge to evade. Uses willpower instead of agility. +3 willpower. If you succeed, deal 2 damage to the evaded enemy. If a elder sign +1 or 0 token is revealed, lose 2 resources. This card is pretty interesting. There's not a lot of times where you can evade and deal 2 damage to an enemy, right? Like, that's a gunshot, basically. And that's kind of fascinating. I'm not entirely sure if that's better than just using a spell to just kill the damn thing, but the ability to have evasion, which lets you control the enemy and prevent them from attacking you, while also starting to kill them, like, there's something there that's pretty exciting. Maybe this is a one-off alongside your combat spell, like Shriveling or Azure Flame, and then you bring this in for the big boss fight, where you are able to evade the big, massive, nasty thing, deal 2 damage to it, and then spend your other actions with your other spells to deal lots of damage to it. Otherwise, like, you could just use this as your damage method of choice, especially if you're using a couple of events to back it up, and just kill things or leave them alone. The fact that it still only uses 3 charges is the only thing that kind of bugs me, because I really would like this to have more uses. But you do have recharge in the pack, so, you know, just build your own additional charges. Yeah, there's not a lot of bad things to say about this card. I think it's pretty powerful. Just evade things and then just basically... Like, the only situation that's kind of weird is in the situation where you evade something and just kill them with the 2 damage, because it's like, well, then you could have just used, you know, Shriveling. Yeah. Okay, well, as promised, get some red cards. 2 level 0 cards and 3 level 2 cards. So it's not a lot, but it's enough to make me happy. First up, we have Granny Orn level 0, which is a weird card. 4 cost asset, willpower icon, ally, takes up the ally slot. You get +1 willpower, which is kind of neat. I mean, survivors, anybody outside of Mystic doesn't really lean on their willpower too hard, but this does let you protect against the encounter deck a bit more, which is nice. And then when an investigator at your location would fail a skill test, exhaust her, that investigator fails by either 1 less or 1 more. Now, importantly, this does not change your skill value, so you don't succeed if you failed by 0. You're still just failing. So that makes this a mitigation tool against things like Rotting Remains and Grasping Hands, where you take damage or horror equal to the amount you failed by. And that's kind of it, right? Like, failing by 1 more, the only cards I think we've seen that care about how much you fail are still the Brother Grimm's Fairy Tale and the Rabbit's Foot level 3. We haven't seen any other cards that care about failing by a lot. So, yeah, I have to admit, this is not the awesome Granny Orn I was hoping for when we saw the level 3 version and were told or were shown that we would get a level 0 version, but we didn't see the textbook yet. This card is unusual, and I don't know if it is the default go-to level 0 ally for Stella, which is still a question that's kind of up in the air because none of the allies really work with her too well. But I don't think it's a bad card. I think 4 cost is expensive, and I think that the ability to mitigate certain bad stuff is nice. 3 horror or 3 sanity, also quite good. But it is worth comparing to someone like Peter Sylvester, who has 3 cost and gives you +1 agility and can give you free horror heals every single turn. I think it's gonna be a wait and see thing. Maybe also just, you know, take the level 0 and then just upgrade into the level 3, which is really strong, because having a +1 skill value on tap is really powerful. Those mini luckies are really good. Also, +1 intellect, kind of nice for Stella actually, as it turns out. Anyway, moving on, we get to a card that I think people are going to be upset about. Will to Survive, level 0, combat and agility icon. It is a spirit traded card, fast, play only during your turn. Do not reveal chaos tokens for the next skill test you perform this turn. This is a 0 XP card. Okay, why did they have to make this card? So the problem is that if you are doing anything remotely fair with this card is kind of bad because it costs 4 resources. I think the only fair application I can think of that is probably eager to pay those 4 resources is in Preston, who gets a terrible, terrible stat line in exchange for getting 4 extra resources every turn. So for him, he can pay this with his inheritance, and then he can still do things. Otherwise, the only time you're going to include this card is if you're going to do stupid, broken things with it, such as double or nothing, with a bunch of rogue skill cards in there, to make yourself super rich, draw lots of cards, move across the map, kill all the enemies. Like, I know they don't. Maybe I don't know why they printed this card if the only time where a lot of people are going to be running it is in decks that are absolutely awful to play with, right? Because you just get situations wherein you break the game, right? You get lots of money from Watch This, you get lots of, sorry, I'm getting way too negative, which is partially inspired because the conversation around this card was just very negative in general. Because it's not good if you're just using it to avoid 1 chaos token, and it's broken if you're using it to combo with a bunch of other stuff. There are some amount of combo decks with Will to Survive level 3, but those have all been restricted to Survivor only because it's a level 3 card in Survivor, so even off-class rares can't take it. This is level 0. You can literally take it in anyone if you want to versatile for it, and it is just going to be a combo engine. So I don't like the inclusion of this card in the card pool because I just don't think anyone is going to do anything balanced with it. They're just going to try to break it. Okay, enough negativity. Let's talk about the Test of Will level 2, which is very interesting. So we already saw level 0 Test of Will in this cycle, or in this pack rather. This is, however, a level 2 version. So zero cost event. I should actually restart at the proper place. So 0 cost event, so it's cheaper now. 1 willpower icon, spirit traded, fast. Play when an investigator at your location draws a non-weakness treachery card. Cancel that card's revelation effect. Then test willpower 3. If you fail, exile a Test of Will. So this is basically a mashup between level 0 and level 1, where you always cancel the test, or cancel the revelation effect, so there's no worry there. But then you still have to test willpower 3, but if you succeed, you don't have to exile the cards, which is neat. So exile, in case you don't know, it removes from the deck, and then you have to spend the XP again to purchase it. This is pretty neat, especially in Stella, where you might be inclined to actually choose to fail the test, because you get to still cancel the revelation effect and do not have to worry about that, but you also get to fail a test and trigger whatever effect you've got going on there. So that is a very interesting part of this card that I don't think maybe everybody's picked up on yet. Like, you might want to actually just fail the test. I mean, it'll cost you 3 XP, sure, but it also, you know, if it causes you to win the game, seems pretty reasonable. In general, I think this is pretty fun. Cancel effects are pretty powerful in general, so yeah, we get more of them. Awesome. You know, sign me up. Then we have our second to last card is Dumb Luck level 2, which is kind of exciting. 2 cost event, willpower and 2 agility icons. And Dumb Luck is a fortune. Fast, play after you fail a skill test by 3 or less during an evasion attempt against a non-elite enemy. Place that enemy on the bottom of the encounter deck. So Dumb Luck level 0 was a Forgotten Age card, and this is significantly better because it puts the card at the bottom of the encounter deck. The original Dumb Luck put it at the top. I think Dumb Luck is actually underplayed. It's also in the Stella deck, by the way, the level 0 version. It's one of the reprints, but I think the problem with that card is usually that the only time it's really that useful is if you have like a bunch of weapons in hand and you don't have time to play them because you're engaged with this enemy. You can Dumb Luck and then put them on top of the deck and then play cards. Or sometimes you need it to do like reset enemies that have Doom on them, something like that. But Dumb Luck level 2 just puts the card at the bottom of the encounter deck. They're gone, right? It's essentially like you've just gotten rid of them. In that case, it does kind of compete with Close Call, which shuffles an enemy to the encounter deck if you've evaded them successfully. And I kind of like this as a measure against failure, where if you know you're going to probably succeed, but not always succeed, because autofills are a thing, this is a very good to be like, well, I'll probably just evade the center enemy and move on, and it's fine. But if I don't, I actually get to just get rid of them. So yeah, I like this card. I think there's probably a deck that just runs Dumb Luck and Close Call, and you just, whenever you evade something or fail to evade something, it just goes away. And then our final card, I think it's a good one to end on. It is Look What I Found level 2, a 2 cost event, 2 intellect icons and a agility icon randomly. Fortune, fast, play after you fail a skill test by 3 or less while investigating. Discover 2 total clues from among your location and connecting locations. Just like the original Look What I Found, this card's really good. This one is kind of interesting because one of the tricks that people often do with Look What I Found is that if they're at a 4-shroud location, they use something like the old keyring or flashlight to reduce the shroud to 2. If they then fail, they always will have failed by 2 or less because of the fact that they don't have, because the difficulty, you can't fail by more than difficulty because your modified skill value will be set to 0 after all the calculations are made. This kind of does that by itself by allowing you to be at a 3-shroud location and then just get the clues from wherever you actually need them, right? Because this is just like the Seeking Answers effect. You can get the clues from somewhere else. For solo, I think this is a great upgrade. So you can get your 2 clues from 2 separate locations, because in solo there might not be 2 clues on 1 location. So yeah, I think this is great. I really like it. And that's actually going to do it. So thank you very much for watching. I'm pretty warm. It's been a long video. It's almost an hour, looks like it. Oh. So yeah, this has been all the leaks. They're all in the Imgur albums, which are going to be in the description below. Thank you very much for watching. I'm hoping to do more recording soon, but it is incredibly hot right now, and I don't want to be recording with the windows closed and the AC off for too long, because I'm going to literally melt. But if you've been watching so far, thank you very much. Consider subscribing. A lot of people have, and we're almost at 200, which is insane to me. I love it. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'll be seeing you until the end of time.